Hi, I'm Dan Cornell, Principal at Denim, and I'll be talking about vulnerability management in an application security world. Infrastructure level vulnerability management is a process that most organizations have reasonably well figured out. It typically involves setting a baseline of what you want your organization's risk profile to look like, identifying situations where you're not complying with that baseline, and then making configuration changes or applying patches in order to fix these identified vulnerabilities. In the application security space, you have to do the same thing, but the process is a little more complicated because the people finding the vulnerabilities, often on the security or IT audit side, are not the folks that are actually going to make the fixes that address those vulnerabilities out in the software development organization. So what we're going to look at is the process in organizations where you have activities such as penetration testing and code review that are ongoing and they're identifying software vulnerabilities that indicate risk for the organization. Now, as these vulnerabilities stack up, organizations have to address this risk. They've got to make a determination of how they're going to handle these things. The challenge is that the people who actually are going to do the work are the software developers. And so to be successful in this, identified application level vulnerabilities have to be translated into defects that the software developers can manage in their defect tracking system and then roll into their development efforts, test those changes and then push them out into production. What we'll talk about during this discussion will be ways of grouping vulnerabilities so that you don't overwhelm your software developers with defects. And we'll also look at a risk and effort-based mitigation strategy to determine which defects you might just decide to live with rather than transferring them over to the software developers. Finally, we'll look at the communication process that has to go on so that you make sure that software developers understand the underlying causes of these vulnerabilities so that they can make fixes that actually have a great impact. Again, we'll be talking about vulnerability management in an application security world, and I hope you'll follow me on Twitter, Daniel Cornell.